Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Car Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple, and tonight I am very happy to welcome Irene Solá to celebrate the English translation of her book, I Gave You Eyes and You Looked Toward Darkness. Let's give a hand for Irene. She is joined tonight in conversation by Green Apple favorite Shruti Swamy. Let's give a hand for Shruti as well. I'm very excited to have you both here, and you've also traveled so far to join us. I really appreciate it, and this book is very good, and I hope that you all, if you have not read it yet, that you get to read it after this event. I have very brief business before I let these two take over. First, thank you so much for joining us here in person and also online. Hello, online audience. I'm looking at the camera if you can't see. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement, and as such, I would like to let you know that we are operating on unceded Ramaytush land. We think that acknowledgement requires action, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. We have details at the back desk about the Ramaytush Land Trust if you are interested in how to participate in this project of rematriation. Very brief business. Now's a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. Photos, I've been told, are totally fine to take, like action shots as our authors are talking rather than asking them to pose. And the addendum to that also is no bad photos, only good photos are allowed. So no bad photos, especially not to go on the internet. So the main reason for saying that is to please not take a call in the middle of the event while you are sitting here. Please do check out our event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event that you are currently attending. Please do, if you are able, buy books. We have books by both of our authors available here this evening, and we're actually going to hear from both of our authors' work this evening, which is a nice treat. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two writers who are joining us tonight. First, Shruti Swamy is the author of the story collection A House is a Body and the novel The Archer. She's received grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, Elizabeth George Foundation, San Francisco Arts Council, and Vassar College, and is a 2024 Rome Prize Fellow in Literature. She teaches writing with the collective The Dream Side. Let's give one more hand for Shruti Swamy. And last but most certainly not least, Irene Solá is a writer and visual artist. She is the author of the poetry collection Beast, as well as the novels The Dams and When I Sing, Mountains Dance. Her novel, I Gave You Eyes and You Looked Toward Darkness, was translated into English by Faye Lethem and is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more hand for Irene Solá.
Thank you all so much for joining us. We thought we'd start with a reading, and Irene is going to grace us with a reading in the original language, Catalan, and then I will read a translation and read a little bit of my own work. Hello everyone, and thanks for being here. So I'm gonna start at the very beginning of the book. Matinada. La foscor era morada i bellugadissa, opaca, grana i alhora blava, zumzejant, pigallada, cega, espessa, fonda i brillant a la vegada. Estava infestada de cucs, de branques, de tremolors, de venes, de clapes. Les taques, indiscernibles, eren les parets panxudes d'una habitació, el sostre, un llit, una tauleta de nit, una calaixera, una porta i una finestra. Les tenebres crepitaven. S'agitaven, murmurejaven, roncaven. El ronc era nasal, somort i aspre, que risquejava, engolia i s'ofegava. La font del bramul era el llit i el bony que hi dormia al mig. Una dona vella, corpulenta. La vermadeta tenia els ulls tancats, les parpelles de sargantana sense pestanyes, la boca oberta, els llavis liles i aigualits, i els cabells engreixinats i llargs escampats sobre el coixí. Era lletja. O això pensava l'altra dona, la Margarida, que seia al seu costat en una cadira de vímet, amb les mans agafades a la falda i els polzes que donaven voltes. Dins del llit, la Bernadeta va empassar-se una alenada barruera d'aire, va abandonar un ronc rovellós a mitges i va deixar de respirar. Fora, es va sentir el cant d'una òliba i després silenci. La Margarida va aturar els polzes, va estirar el coll, va observar la vella i per un moment va pensar que ja estava, que era l'hora. Però l'avenc fosc de la boca de la Bernadeta va sospirar, va inhalar i va reprendre el renou. I la Margarida va tornar l'esquena al respatller de la cadira i va continuar fent rodar els dits. Era una vella escarransida, amb cap de pardal, ulls severs, boca inflexible d'altes magres, coll aixarraït i espatlles encorbades. I resava. Tota la nit que resava, pobra Margarida, perquè el Senyor mana pregar i fer pregar. Però com que la Margarida fet pregar no podia, perquè la llengua de les seves parentes, les que entenien, era un terrós incapaç de dir res bo, resava ella, amb l'esperança que si resava molt, tard o d'hora Déu l'escoltaria i la distingiria enmig de tants pecats i tantes pecadores. La gombolaria entre els seus braços de pare i diria que no l'hauria hagut de desemparar mai, filleta, que la Margarida era bona i era santa i que quedava perdonada. Perdonada de les coses que havia fet ella i de les que havien fet les altres.
Oh, that felt like an incantation. Thank you for that beautiful reading. So this is in English Dawn. The darkness was purple and fidgety, opaque, buzzing and speckled, blind and thick, at once gleaming and fathomless. It was infested with worms, branches, tremors, veins, blotches. Impalpable stains formed the bulging walls of the room, its ceiling, a bed, a night table, a dresser, a drawer, a door, and a window. The shadows cackled. The shadows crackled. They vibrated, they murmured, they snored. The snoring was nasal, muffled and serrated. It grated, it gulped, and it choked. That rumbling emanated from the bed and the bump that slept in the middle of it. An old woman. A portly old woman. Bernadetta's eyes were closed, her lizard lids lashless, her mouth open, her gossamer lips splotchy and lilac, her long, greasy hair splayed across the pillow. She was ugly. Or that's what the other woman, Margarita, was thinking as she sat beside her on a wicker chair, hands clasped in her lap, twiddling her thumbs. In her bed, Bernadetta swallowed an ungainly exhalation, went quiet midway through a violent snore, and ceased breathing. Outside, owls sang, and then it was quiet. Margarita's thumb stopped. She craned her neck and observed the old woman, and for a moment she thought that was it, that the time had come. But the dark chasm of Bernadetta's mouth sighed, inhaled, and the whole racket started up once more. Margarita again settled back in her chair and continued her twiddling. She was a puny woman with the head of a sparrow, severe eyes, a rigid mouth, lean cheeks, a parched throat, and curved shoulders. And she was praying. Poor Margarita prayed all through the night, because the Lord commands us to pray and to bid others to pray. But since Margarita couldn't bid others to pray, because the tongues of her relatives, or at least those who had tongues, were mere lumps, incapable of saying anything helpful, Margarita prayed herself, in the hopes that, if she prayed hard and long, sooner or later God would hear her. Surely He would make out her voice amid all the sins and the sinners. He would gather her up in His paternal arms, and He would say that He should never have abandoned her, my daughter, that Margarita was good and saintly, that she was forgiven. Forgiven for the things she'd done and the things the other women had done. It's so funny to do that reading for you. You know, I think I'm going to wait to read my my work, and I want to start asking you questions, and then we'll come back if there's time. So this book, this astonishing book that we're here to celebrate today, is such a it is a truly thrilling. It feels absolutely singular to me. I don't think I've read a book like this before. It's set in a devil haunted and an ancestor haunted house. It ranges through several centuries. It's told in a really particular, there's so many stylistic choices you made, and I almost want to use the word style to ask you this question, but I think what I'm asking is a little bit deeper than style. I think that there is a way that your perspective, there's this weave of history and folklore, the way that time is layered, and I'm going to ask you more about that later, the polyphonic nature of this storytelling, and it's like raunchiness, it's humor, it's like sensuality. The way that language is used feels truly singular and very particular to you and your sensibility. And I wanted to ask you how you came to write. I wanted to ask you more generally how the style developed, and I'm using style sort of as shorthand here, how you came to think about writing in this way, and more specifically, where this book started for you.
So I would say that the first idea or the first thing that I knew about this book was that at the heart of it, there would be a deal with the devil. And that this novel was going to be a novel that would be very interested in like folk tales and like oral narratives, like legends and all that. And I decided, I was thinking about the deal with the devil, which is like a kind of story that is present in like many cultures. But it's also like extremely like, there are a lot of stories that have to do with like dealing with the devil and what happens after that in like Catalan culture. But while I was thinking about the deal with the devil, I was also thinking about another deal that takes place like in narrative and in storytelling. And we were talking a little bit about this before, which is this idea of like the deal with the reader. Like this idea that when you are reading a story or when you are listening to a story or when you are watching a movie, it doesn't matter. You kind of make a deal with whomever is like telling you that story. And for a while, if you connect with the story, if you are willing, if it's a good story, whatever, but for a while, you kind of switch off the like incredulity sensors. And instead of like feeling like or thinking or saying to yourself, oh, this is not true, I don't believe it, she's making this up, you like embrace the story, you believe in it, you like for a while just like submerge yourself in that story. So I was thinking a lot in all these things when I started with this novel, and then the more I researched, the more I read like folklore and folk tales, the more I started like kind of understanding the novel or listening to the novel and knowing what it needed, what it wanted, what it asked for. And so I discovered, or I understood that this was going to be a novel that would happen in one single day, in the present, in one house. And that what was going to happen in this like present, in this house, is that today, the day in which the novel takes place, there is this very old lady we've been reading about, Bernadetta, who's dying. And the novel is like, the day of the novel is like her last day of life. At the end of the day, she will die. And waiting for Bernadetta to die are like all the women that have lived and died in that house since the 16th century, since one of the matriarch, the first of them, actually made a deal with the devil. And what they are doing today, while Bernadetta is there, like sleeping in her bed, is like they are preparing a huge like welcome party for Bernadetta. And they are kind of each from their very different point of view and perspective. They are remembering the family story and the house and story and like everything that has happened there. But because most of these women were born in the 16th century, like the way they speak or even the way they think or even their like mental structure is like very different than ours. And they don't have like the vocabulary many times to like explain very daily things, or at least for us, very like daily things, or like contemporary or modern things. So they have to find their own way to kind of explain like a phone, because in this house there are all these like women, all these ghosts waiting for Bernadette to die, but there are also like living contemporary characters going around and doing their stuff and living their lives. And so the narrative voice who is on the side of all these women, all these ghosts, all these spirits, whatever we want to call them, explains what's going on today, but they do so like being very playful with language and like the way they explain things.
Yeah. I have two questions that I want to ask you simultaneously because they both came up as you were talking, but I'll just have to choose one because we exist in linear time. I want to talk about the devil. It's also funny because I feel like I didn't have any like warm-up questions here. I have like really big, I just felt like this book was so rich and had so many ideas, and it's like overfull with like this beautiful language and so much history and folklore and magic, and so I don't have any like easy questions. I wanted to talk about the devil. The devil is a character in this book and a real force in this book. And something that I found so fascinating was that like the devil exists, God exists, their forces in this book, but the devil is not exactly evil. Like, I wanted to talk about how you were thinking about the figure of the devil and how much of that was like coming directly from this folklore and how much of this was like your interpretation or like wanting to explore that, because the devil is in some ways like a force of nature in this book. People do make deals with him, but often to write it's like, well, I didn't get this thing, like I really want a husband. The original deal with the devil is this woman doesn't get a husband and she really wants a husband. That's not her fault, and an old woman tells her, okay, if he wasn't listening to you, then you can call somebody else, right? So there's a way of like writing an injustice, and there's also, the devil is a very problematically sensual character in this book as well. That it's way less, it's not a good and evil binary that I would be expecting when I read a story about God and the devil as real forces, as real characters in the book. So I was really curious to hear you talk about what you were thinking about with that.
Yeah, sure. So on the one side, the devil in the book is like a very like folkloric devil. It was very interesting when we were editing the book in English, and Mara Lethem, the translator, who I have to say, I think she has done an amazing job, and I'm very happy and I'm grateful that she like has poured her talent into translating this book. So when she was translating the book and we were editing it, we were having these very like funny and interesting conversations with the American editors and Mara, who has lived in Catalonia for many years, and me, trying to kind of like explain like this devil, because it's like in Catalan like folk stories and imagination, the devil is this kind of small-ish character, or like at least human scale character, and the devil, I mean, he is the devil, but at the same time he is not like the devil or like Satan with like capital letters. He is a devil that, as you said, he is like mischievous, but at the same time he is like kind of useless and hopeless. And like anyone who is like slightly clever might be able to like trick him, and sometimes you even feel pity for him, but at the same time don't trust him because he is still like the devil. And so like the way in which I was thinking of the devil has a lot to do with like that like Catalan folkloric devil, but then at the same time one of the themes that I was thinking about when writing this novel is like like subjectivity, like how like we all perceive, feel, understand the world like differently. We all remember it everything differently, and we all are able then to explain it differently. And so like this story is told from the perspective of like very different characters, all these like different women, and they like don't agree almost in anything. Like they have like their point of view on anything, like from like family or like love to death or like memory, like anything you can imagine, like they like have different opinions on it. And so the devil is a very different character depending on who of them is like interacting with him, looking at him, describing him. And also the devil in the book is like a shapeshifter, almost like he appears in all these different like shapes. Sometimes he is a bull, sometimes he is a goat, sometimes he is a like cat, sometimes he is a human or has a human shape. Yeah, the devil and his like constantly changing like attitude and physical form also like allowed me to keep reflecting on subjectivity.
Yeah, that's a great segue into this other thing that I really wanted to ask you about, which is both this novel and I know your previous novel, When I Sing Mountains Dance, are polyphonic novels. So that your previous novel, the perspectives are both human and non-human, where the opening is from the perspective of storm clouds, and you get a really polyphonic sense of that world. In this book, we're in human consciousness mostly, but we are centered on Bernadetta in that she is like our orienting, the woman who's dying, or she's like kind of the orienting figure, but I don't actually think that I would name her as a main character any more than any other of the many characters that populate this book. And even like the house and the place itself have the same force of character too. So, and it felt very intentional that you were not centering the narrative on one person, but that you were dispersing it again across all of these different perspectives. And that seems true of your previous work as well. So I was really curious. I think that's really hard to do, is one thing that like I feel particularly drawn to, that as like a way of destabilizing. Well, actually, I don't want to get into all this. I have like this whole thought. Have you read The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction by Ursula Le Guin?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. So great. This whole destabilizing, like that is an essay that critiques the narrative arc and the idea of the hero and the conflict driving the story. This is a book that does not have a hero, and it has a structure, but I wouldn't call it an arc. So I think that is most visible through this dispersed narrative or these dispersed perspectives. So I was really curious to hear you talk about that.
Yes, sure. Like I was thinking a lot about all these ideas, and I was thinking about the idea of like a family like history or family story. And I was thinking a lot, how do we get to know our own like family like stories? And I was like realizing that like probably like no one is gonna like take your hand, no one in your family is gonna like take your hand, sit you down and like spend like 14 hours or more telling you like the whole family like history. And even if they did that like from a very like honest place, that story would not be like your family's story or history, but their version of it. And they would like choose what they thought was important, what they thought was relevant, worth like passing, what maybe they didn't like that much or thought like was complicated or like. So I was thinking how we actually get to understand our family histories in a more like fragmentary way. So like your mom tells like some parts of it at some point, and then a grandma might like tell another episode, and then an uncle another episode, and through your whole life you like take all these bits and pieces of information and you put them together, and then at some point you realize that some of the like versions don't actually like coincide, or that there are parts of the story that actually no one is addressing, or that many years after the same person who told you something tells the same thing differently. And so I was thinking a lot about this, and that's why like the story of this family is told from like these very different perspectives and very different women who have, like I said, very different ways of approaching everything. And that also allowed me to ask questions about like history in capital letters, and about like I'm asking questions such as like, who has decided like what's relevant and what's not relevant, whose story is like important and whose story is not, like what voices have we been listening to, what voices have we been neglecting, and all those questions. And I guess that's also why the main, like all the main characters, or at least all the characters that are ghosts inside this house telling you about the story of the house, are those who in their part of the world are generally not like the main characters in history in capital letters, and also not the main, in general, not the main characters in stories, not in folk tales either. And it's not only that they are women; it's like that they are all the women. It's like that they are all women, like supposedly ugly women, or at least women outside of the canon, or even like dead women. So yeah, that allowed me to reflect on all these.
Beautiful. Well, you answered one of my questions, which was going to be that. So, great, cool. I also really, something that also really feeds into this same kind of destabilization of the narrative arc here is the way that you use time in this novel. I think that I was sort of in awe of the structure of this novel and the way that time moves. So you mentioned that as this book moves from dawn to night as a woman is dying. So we are in linear narrative time. We have something to put our feet on, right? It's like time is progressing. But in the space of these hours, the ancestors in this house are experiencing their own stories. And throughout, the jacket copy says 400 years of history. You were mentioning, I don't know if I could have named when this book started and when this book ended, but we get cues. It feels like some of the traditional markers of like, we're in a different space than the main narrative of the story are elided for other markers, like these women, for example, noticing that it's a horseless carriage or a mirror, which is how they think of a phone. So we see these markers of technology cueing us into one time period. We also have historical markers where there's mentions of soldiers and war. So we are getting markers of time, but they're different. And the effect this has is that time is happening all at once, that these stories are not in the past and now we're in the present and we will move to the future, that there is a sense when you're reading this book that the past, the present, and the future are existing in this house at the same time. And I think that technically that's really complicated. And also like it's just a fascinating use of time. And I would love to hear you talk about either from a craft level, like how you were thinking about it structurally, like did you outline this and have a lot of different like timelines, and also like just more like intellectually or like emotionally, what drew you to depicting time in this way?
I was making a lot of like drawings to kind of like visually understand what I was trying to build. But then I was like, one of the things I was thinking while writing this novel, but I was thinking in the idea of a house, and I was trying to imagine everything that might have happened inside of a house, like everything that a house might know, everything that might have been like set inside of a house, and how we might live in a house nowadays and like don't know almost anything of that. And so I was like thinking in this housing where like all these events, all these like people, all these feelings, all these conversations would be like all together and all mixed up kind of at the same time. And then I was thinking a lot about, I mean, time also, and about how like and about like the malleability of time, especially if you're like talking about time or like dealing with time through like something as malleable also as language. And so yeah, the house, but also this like today are like elastic enough in order to kind of be able to hold like 400 years of like history and stories. Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I wanted to ask you a question about language, which was that your previous book was translated into 29 languages. And you are trilingual yourself and feel really comfortable in all of those languages. I was curious how how the experience of being translated so widely in so many different languages, what that taught you about the way that you use language. And also, this might be like an unanswerable question, and I think maybe you even answered it just by your reading, because there was sort of a texture in Catalan that we're missing as English readers. But if you can name the quality that draws you to write in Catalan and that you feel like is untranslatable.
So how I work with the translations is mainly like I like offer all my help for like everything I can do for like the translators. I really try to encourage them to like ask questions, ask me as many questions, as little or as big, as relevant or as irrelevant they might feel they are, as they have. And I try to like share with them a lot of my like research or like any, I don't know, images, links, like anything that I think might help them like deeply understand the book. And then I also try to like tell them that to me, like translating this book is not a matter of like translating like word for word, but more like a matter of like deeply understanding like the questions that the book is asking, the games that the book is playing, the research and like experimentation and like all that the book is doing, all the layers that the book is proposing, and like to try and play those games and ask those questions, but from like their own place or their own language. Then with the Spanish translation and the English translation, because I can read those languages, I can be part of that process, and I read the translations before they get published. And then also my editors, both in Spanish and English, they are generous enough to like let me be part of the editing process. And so I'm there with the translator and the editors, and we are having like this conversation about the book. And so I can work on it a little bit like if it was the first or the original language. And I love that process because I learn a lot in that process. I learn about the language, obviously, about like Spanish or English, but then I also learn about like the book itself. Like I see new things, and then I also learn about me as a writer. I understand like things about that. So it's a very very interesting experience. Totally. And then you asked me about Catalan. And I like sometimes people say this thing that there are always things that we lose when a book is like translated. But I always think that we gain much more than we lose. Because if a book was not translated, I wouldn't have been able to read like so many like great books. So I feel that it's always a gain. In terms of Catalan, I write in Catalan because it is like my language, and because the way I know it and the way I relate with it is very like kind of deep, let's say, or I feel it this way, that I can be very playful but also very intuitive with it, and that's me. It's like sometimes they ask me like, why did you choose to write in Catalan? And when they use the word choose, I always say, wow, you're using the word choosing, and I never chose it, in the sense that I never sat down on a table and kind of decided in which language am I going to write. It is something much more like organic and natural than that. And I think also like precisely because of natural and organic, also very powerful. I'm
so curious. This book is so. This book feels very meticulously crafted in one way, and then it also feels incredibly wild. And I'm curious, you use the word choice in terms of being like, well, obviously I'm going to write in this language. That wasn't a choice for me. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the process of writing this book and that balance between, I feel like when I'm writing, there's things that I'm like, well, that's just their name. Or I'm like, well, that's just what happened. And I know that I'm making it up, and it feels like when I'm really writing, I'm like, that happened, or like I know when it's right and when it's wrong. So I'm really curious, because there's so many technical elements of this book that are really complex and feel very controlled, but then there's also so much wildness in this book. You could just talk a little bit about the process, like how long did this book take you to write, and like what was different about the process of writing this book than your previous books?
So I was working in this book probably like around 5 to 6 years, I would say, something like that. And to me, like I'm very interested in the process. To me the process is like as important, or I would say even more important than the result itself. When I start writing a novel, I never know which novel I'm going to write, and that doesn't really bother me at all. What I try to do when I start writing a novel is I try to ask myself, or I try to understand, what am I interested in enough in order to be thinking about it, and in order to be working with it for the next month and the next years. And then I start a research process that includes everything. It includes reading, it includes going to archives and libraries, but also going to places or meeting people who knows things that I don't know, or watching YouTube videos. Anything is part of the research process. And I start researching, but then as early on as I can, I also start writing, because to me writing is also a way of thinking, a way of continuing the research. And I have this feeling that I'm interested in stories, both as a reader and as a writer, because they allow me two things. So on the one side, there is an element of joy, of enjoyment, of just having fun, having fun writing, or having fun reading. It's extremely it's something that I really, really enjoy and really, really like. But then on the other side, they allow me to think, to reflect, to ask questions. So to me, writing has to do both with the stomach, what's intuitive, what's right because you know that it's right, or what's has to do with curiosity and has to do with surprise even. But then it has writing has also to do with the mind. It's also to do with thinking and asking questions.
Did you feel like you answered your questions? Or do you feel like when you write the book, you just write to live in the question?
I feel like I am like that the important thing to me is to ask the question and to like in asking the question opening up more questions and opening up like a thinking process. Like I always say like that I don't think it's my job to like bring the answers because then if I was giving answers to, for example, like the readers, I think that would be kind of like manipulative even, like to like it was like giving like people like spoons of what I think they should think, and I don't think my writing has to do with that. Like I think I am asking questions to myself and aloud and giving those questions so like everyone can think, but not saying what the others might think or how they should think.
Yeah, so I think that this book puts a lot of trust in the reader to come in and make their own meaning from it. Yeah, that feels really right. I'm going to read just one really quick passage from my book, and then I will open it up for questions. This is your book, which I would love to read. I was going to read another passage from Irene's book because it was so beautiful, but then she already answered the question. I was going to read for like 5 minutes this beautiful passage and then ask her this super simple question about why this book was centered on women, but then she already answered it, so I was like, okay, I can't figure out a reason to read it. But you'll just have to buy the book and read it. This is a very beautiful book. Okay, I'm just going to read the first like passage from my novel, and you don't need to know anything about it because it's the first page. For a time, Vidya had not had a mother or a brother. She had only the idea of a mother and a brother. They were imaginary but real, the same way God was. For a time, she had not had a mother but an aunt, and not a brother but 2 cousins who had lived with her in the one-room flat she shared with her father. The cousins were girls, older than her. They were not cruel, but it was clear they found her irrelevant. They did their homework quietly in the kitchen, whispering to each other, glamorous secrets of movies and breasts. The aunt had rough, worried hands and yanked the comb through the girl's hair, which got snarled even in braids. When Father Sir came home from giving tuitions, she had gone to sleep but had heard the door open and shut. There was a woman in a room they went to visit every month, a woman with no voice and a face that turned toward the window, but that was not a mother. Mothers lived at home with their children and sang to them. Now the aunt not mother had been put away with the cousins not brother, and the room not mother had come to live in the house and answered Vidya's question, when is my mother coming home? Was she asked out of habit more than hope, with the firm and sometimes angry response of, I am your mother. The girl put her hands curiously in the room not mother's hair, but room not mother brushed her away as though she were a fly. She asked room not mother to sing a song to her at bedtime, and room not mother did not sing a song and instructed her to close her eyes. She closed her eyes. In the dark, she could hear Father Sir talking to room not mother, who answered his questions very simply with yeses and nos. Was the heat making her feel ill? No. Had she heard from her sister? No. Would she write to her again? Yes. Then her mind flattened like a coin, and Vidya was asleep. And I'll just end there. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Irene? Now is the time to ask them. She's got very interesting answers. Yeah, please.
You talk about research and the archive, and I'm curious for this specific book, what kinds of materials were you interacting with? What were you looking for, or what did you find that surprised you as part of that research?
Sure. Like many different things that went like in many different directions. And so I started reading a lot about like folklore, like both in a very like general like European folk tales way, but then also I was working with a very specific group called Grup de Recerca Folclòrica d'Osona, which is like 3 men who for the last 40 years have been like like just recollecting all the like stories and legends and songs in like the area where the novel takes place. Like speaking to like much older people who most of them are not alive anymore, and they have like crazy material. They have published a lot of books, but they also have a lot of material. But then I was like, I kept on researching, and like for example, there is one character who is like a cheesemaker, so I was like visiting like cheesemakers and learning how to make cheese. But then like I was also like, there is like a character who is a bandit in the book, and I was researching a lot about this like quite famous bandit in Catalonia called Serrallonga, and reading like all his trial and all the materials that are like around him, and thinking a lot about like his story, but also the way in which his story has been told very differently depending on like which time of history we're talking about, or like and then reflecting a lot how the women that surrounded him have been like treated and portrayed, both by historians or like by fiction. But then like I was like I another thing that I do when I'm writing a novel is like I keep making this like visual atlas, which is like I like research also kind of visually, like, and I keep all the images that might help me think about the book, but think like visually. And then at the end I have like these like tons of like images that have helped me work with the book. Then yeah, I was also watching like YouTube videos, like my algorithm going absolutely mad. So yeah, like and I could continue like this because it's been many years of like researching and writing takes you to places that you didn't even know that were there. And yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah.
I'm curious about the difference between, you're a poet as well, and reading a handful of pages. I plan on getting the book because it is really good. I noticed that it's almost as if you bleed into like prose poetry at certain times. It's like the words are so rich that it evokes a poetic voice. And I'm curious, when you're writing poetry versus a novel, is there a difference that you notice in the writing? Is there a way that you filter your thought into the word that is different from when you do writing poetry versus something more prosaic?
I guess the answer could both be yes and no. So I also studied art, and I have this feeling that the project asks for what it needs and asks for like the shape that it needs to take, and it depends on what you are working on and how you are working on it. And I don't really like sometimes people ask me like, or do you still make art? Or like they like in people's mind things are very like separate, like so this is poetry, this is prose, this is art, this is, and to me it's like all in the same kind of swimming pool, and it just like and it depends on the project that it takes one shape or another. But then also like I think language is amazing, and I think you can do so many things with language, and I try to like think about that and explore about that and be very playful with that, and then also because this novel is a novel that reflects and thinks a lot about folk tales. While I was writing it, I was also like kind of reading it aloud to myself in order to kind of listen to it and listen to the sound it makes when read aloud, and like the rhythm and like so
reading it almost demands that voice. Like it's there, and it comes through so clearly.
And that's something that we were also talking a lot with the translators, because every language sounds different, but like that's amazing. That's like a translation doesn't need or doesn't have to sound like Catalan. It has to sound like its own language and be very playful with what you can do with that specific language. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Having only read your previous book, everything you're saying about your research, it makes so much sense to me because I felt like even though the language is so poetic, there's like such a depth, like you feel like you've entered this world, and I can kind of imagine that now as you're like going on this journey of finding all these details. But I'm really curious, like how you balance between like goals in your research, like specific things you want in the book and exploration, kind of being open, and then how do you know like you're done?
It has to do a little bit with this thing that we were saying about like mind and stomach and maybe also even like spinal cord. Like like sometimes people ask me like, how do you know how to stop the research, for example? And to me it's like, because I am researching for the book, which is and precisely because I am researching for the book, research takes me to places that only, like, if I was only like curious about one specific thing, I would research that specific thing, and maybe the research would be just that. Because it's for the book, like the book keeps asking me to research, like, okay, now like I need to understand how like a medieval marriage might take place, but also I need to know how to kill like baby goat and cook it, and I also need to know like, and so that but all that I am researching for the book, and sometimes I do find amazing things or things that interest me a lot, but then I realize at some point that this is amazing, I love it, it's great, but the book doesn't actually need it, and I just need to let it go. And maybe then there is another project in which that makes sense, or it asks for a new project. But to me, it has to do with like deeply listening to the project, and it is a whole relationship that you establish with the project, and the project has its own like rhythms and needs, and it is, at least for me, like what I'm doing is trying to understand it, and deeply understand it, so I can. I mean, obviously, it's me making the decisions, but it's also like. The project is a thing in itself, so you just have to like really deeply listen, understand, and then the more you listen and understand, the more you know what the project is about and what it needs, and when it needs you to stop, and when you have said what you had to say, and if you say if you want to say more things, maybe you actually need to start a new project or whatever.
And how do you listen?
Like patience is a good thing. Time is another good thing. Walking is another good thing, and yeah, like not. To me, it's like not being in a hurry is also important, and like not wanting to know everything beforehand, or wanting to understand everything at first. It is a matter to kind of, and also like being open to surprise. So it's, for me, it's been a lifelong journey, this thing of like learning how to listen to like a project, and also listen to everything and everyone, and
Beautiful. I think I saw a question in the back a little while ago.
Yeah. I was just wondering, like, how did you decide that you wanted to be a writer and focus on writing, and like, how did you get your start and garner the initial boost?
I'm not that sure that I decided, or that one day I woke up and I knew, okay, I'm gonna be a writer. I was studying fine arts, because at home there is no like creative writing, or at least when I was studying, there was no like creative writing like degree or anything like that you could do, and I really knew that I wanted to like study something creative, so I spent like 5 years in like a fine art studio, painting, drawing, doing video, but also writing a lot. And to me, what I learned there was how to like develop a creative project, this like listening thing, this idea of like how to spend all your hours and weeks and months and years doing something that actually no one has asked you to do, and like no one is interested in apart from yourself. And that's how it should be, I think, like this idea of doesn't matter in what you work, just make sure that you are deeply interested in it. Because that, to me, that's the only thing that matters. Like, and then I finished fine arts and I wanted to study literature because I didn't understand why in fine arts we were like doing like a lot, like art history and painting and like a lot of stuff, but like no literature. So I did an MA in literature and I learned a lot there, but it was not a creative MA. It was just like pure like theory and academy. And I realized there, okay, I'm not interested in academy. I just want so I spent the whole day working on the papers and stuff that I had to do for uni, just like wishing for the night to arrive so I could like write. I could like use what I had learned, but in a creative way. So okay, I've learned this and that. That's very interesting, but I want to play with it. I want to try it. And that's how I wrote my first novel, not really knowing that it would end up being a novel, just like trying out everything that I was thinking about and stuff. Yeah, and then I finished that one and I was like, oh, this is fun. Like, I really like this. There is so much to explore. There is so many things to try. I want to keep doing that. And then I just kept doing that.
It's so interesting that, like, it's almost like other, like, fine arts taught you more than you need. Or, like, it's almost like it's crazy how much you were able to use from your experience in, like, visual arts.
Yeah, I'm very, very thankful and grateful to that. Like, some other people have very different experiences studying fine arts. Some people just, like, really don't like it, or it's not at all what they were expecting, or whatever. But to me, yeah, like, I learned how to write or how to develop a like creative project there. Yeah, not because I learned how to draw or how to paint, but because I learned this thing of like, okay, what am I interested in? Okay, let's just go for it. Thanks.
We have time for one more question if anybody has a question.
Given that it takes years for you to write a novel, are you working on something right now?
Yes, I am. And I have to say that San Francisco has been very inspiring. Like, I'm very surprised because I have quite a lot of jet lag. And I woke up very early this morning and I was quite tired, and I had the feeling that I should not start working at all today. Like, I've been traveling for 2 weeks. It's almost the end of my tour. And I was like, no, I don't think you should try to do anything today because you might just end up being very like frustrated or something. And so I started reading, but then I suddenly felt like I wanted to work on my next project. And I spent like lots of hours this morning working, and I was very hungry and I didn't have any food. But I was like, I want to keep on working. And so that has been very unexpected.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I just want to mark that we were all talking about it, how hard the world is right now. And I just want to mark how special this is that we are here in this beloved cultural institution, this Green Apple Books, and we're here with this beautiful book that is absolutely is modeling freedom for us in its choices, and is published by a beloved small press, Grey Wolf Books. And we have this wonderful author here who is coming to us in translation. I just feel like whenever I feel true despair about the world, I think like here we are together, all agreeing that this is important to us and matters to us, and that is at least deeply meaningful and like gives me solace. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Irene, so much for coming so far to talk about this book with us, and thank you to Green Apple Books for being the best. And thank you all for being here too.
Thank you very much.